overwhelm her with summer yet, but she needs to do that.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, you guys are ready? Sorry, Jamie. You ready? Okay. All right. Just stand by for a sec. We'll be on in. Welcome to the CURES Care Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. A lot of us might have upcoming holiday parties to go to, whether it be with work or family, and sometimes those interactions are downright rude. So what do you say? How do you handle those comments? We are bringing in psychologist Dr. Laura Saunders. She's a psychologist at the Institute of Living to give us sort of the ultimate comeback from your side of the couch. Dr. Saunders, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for being here. And I guess one of the things that I really worry about is that this can potentially be a very social time of the year.
Yeah.
People are invited to parties. I got invited to a neighbor's house on Saturday, for neighbor. I mean, this is a time of the year where you might get invited to things, and I would love for people to take advantage of those social connections because it helps us realize that we're not just caught up in our own little worlds, and it helps us build connections with people. But at the same time, you have to be able to manage some of the social expectations and some of the comments that people make to you.
Right. We wish everyone could just go and learn that this is not what you say to anyone. Like, you never ask a woman unless you're absolutely sure. Actually, I think it's a never. Never ask if a woman's pregnant. Never.
Exactly.
Never. Just don't do that. But there's
Never.
also, like, when people are younger even, it looks like you've gained the freshman 15 as the kids are coming home from college, and they kind of rib them a little. That's so obnoxious, but what do you do? How do you handle these kind of comments? Because you say, actually, they really can sting, and in some people, they might even trigger things like disordered eating.
Yes. So, and this is not even, just about women. I wouldn't say make this comment or say this to young men either. So I think as a general rule, women tend to be more sensitive about their weight. But any kind of a comment about, gaining weight is going to be potentially painful. So, this is where we focus on, how do you respond to this? What is your way to either set a boundary or respond to it? And it could be something like, wow, I feel really hurt by that statement. I don't know that a lot of people would have the ability to make themselves that vulnerable. But it's having some kind of a comeback around, I'm not focused on weight. I'm just thinking about eating healthy, or, coming up with something, sort of a standard phrase. I do like it to be, an I statement, makes it more personal. If you were to say something like, there are no good options in our university cafeteria, you're actually kind of saying like, yeah, I am gaining a lot of weight and I feel bad about it. So it's coming up with something that sort of deflects it, but at the same time is, letting the other person know, back off.
Yes. So I love, a lot of times psychologists will tell us this, right? Like, come to the I. And the minute we say you, it's a problem. So go to that I statement of, I don't weigh myself, I feel healthy, move on, get a glass of water. Can't you just say, that's so rude? Or are you just opening up a hornet's nest?
I mean, I think you could potentially say that. I don't know that Miss Manners would approve of that statement. But at the same time, it's like, wow, I mean, that's kind of hurtful. So it's really, talking about how it impacts you. Not everyone has the ability to think on the spot like that, which is why I do encourage people to have a couple of phrases, repeat them to yourself, do a little role play on the ride over, do something where you have some standard phrases, and that you can come back. And, anything around weight tends to be very personal. Even if you're saying things around losing weight, right? Oh, you look so skinny. Are you not even eating? Have you lost weight? You don't know what someone's going through and whether or not that statement could be really hurtful to them.
Yeah. Okay. So losing weight, we usually think of that as a compliment. Like, wow, you look great. What are you doing? I guess rather than you look so skinny, you would recommend if you are going to say something to someone, you look great. What are you doing? That kind of thing rather than, because what if someone's losing weight for a wrong reason, like a health reason that they're worried about, I guess.
Right. But that's a perfect, like, you look great. What are you doing? What are you doing to take care of yourself? Something along those lines is actually commenting that you notice a difference, but you're not labeling it or creating a value judgment around it.
Okay.
And while it might seem okay to say, oh my gosh, you look so skinny, or you look like you've lost weight, like if you haven't lost weight, you're thinking, well, how big did you think I was beforehand? Right? You think I've lost weight. I don't think I've lost any weight. You must have thought I was really big. Right? So you see how this can really spin itself into something negative.
Okay. Big thing around the holidays is drinking. And how do you handle, you say sometimes you get those rude comments, where's your drink? What, are you not drinking anymore? Are you pregnant? So how do we handle that?
Yes. So drinking is a big part of many, many holiday gatherings. And navigating the holidays, if you're taking a break from drinking or you're not drinking for whatever reason you might not be drinking, can make it a little bit more difficult. So it's coming up with some standard phrases. I think often in these situations, other people if they're drinking, other people are uncomfortable if everyone's not drinking. But I don't want anyone to feel forced to drink if they don't want to drink. Sometimes people, refer to alcohol as like social oil, that they need a little bit of a drink to help them in a social situation. That's not necessarily good either, but that's not uncommon. But finding a way to still allow yourself to participate in a holiday gathering or in a social gathering, even if you've decided to take a break from alcohol. And you don't have to give people your whole backstory or your whole life story on this. You can simply say, taking a little break, just getting a little healthier, looking at my nutrition. I mean, you can give a sort of general pat statement that sets the boundary, gives information, and then helps you back away.
So to handle these people who might be a little rude at the holiday gathering, asking about things like, wow, you look like you gained some weight, or why aren't you married? When are you going to get married? You want us to remember in general some I statements and actually maybe rehearse them ahead of time.
Actually, I feel fortunate that I'm someone who really does well in a lot of social situations, and I really love social situations. But I too practice some standard phrases or things that I'm willing to share. I sometimes will use starter phrases, and it could be something simple as, wow, I haven't seen you in a long time. What's new? Someone shared this with me one time, and they said, what's the best thing that's happened to you this week? So I've used that a few times. I love that. But to have some of these simple phrases, either to set a limit if something has changed about you and you don't necessarily want to comment on it, to have that phrase, to do a little mental rehearsal around how you would respond to someone, especially in situations where someone tends to make very blunt or rude statements. You can try to avoid that person, but to, have some type of comeback when they say something.
Have it ready to go, right? Also, I think moms, we get very sensitive, right? Moms carry the guilt of the judging eyes and why is your kid doing that? Or how do we handle it when maybe an in-law or a relative or even another mom makes a comment about what your kid is doing or not doing at a party, and you feel that mom shame?
So we all, as parents, feel a tremendous amount of responsibility for how we raise our children, the lessons and the morals and the values that we impart to our children, how they behave in situations when we're not there to correct their behavior. And that's, that we're talking young children, middle school, high school age, even, young adults. Hopefully we can start to let some of that go as adults. But I think even then you feel such an attachment to their behavior. So the hope is that that your child behaves appropriately in situations. But even if they don't, if your child is different in some way, they could be neurodivergent, they could be pretty hyperactive, they could have really poor social skills and have difficulty relating to their peers. Very often as parents, we take that personally and we feel a sense of personal responsibility to manage that or fix that. And honestly, a lot of times in those situations, allowing your child to work through some of those difficulties on their own is the best way that they will learn from it.
So what do you say to that judging person? Like, oh, you're not going to punish him, or why are they not eating everything on their plate?
So it's that those phrases of, thank you for bringing it to my attention, I'll manage this, right? And you don't need to really go beyond that. It's, you can say little Johnny or little Mary is working on their social skills, looks like they have a little more work to do. I mean, you can make a statement like that, but it's best to sort of, say something along the lines of, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll take it from here, or I'll manage it from here.
Okay. And there's also confusion in family situations about who is able to correct your kids. And this gets a little dicey because sometimes kids don't react well if someone else corrects them. And then there's the theory of it takes a village. So what's your suggestion if you're in a family environment and you're worried that, or what would be a good standard, I guess, about allowing others to correct your kid?
So this is an interesting kind of sociological dynamic, because the belief really had been for generations that anyone could say anything to anyone's children, because we were all, as a society, community, village, it was all of our responsibility to help raise children. And I think that thinking has shifted a lot in the past probably 10 or 20 years. Whereas, a lot of parents feel like my child's my responsibility and no one else is allowed to say anything to them. As a psychologist, and really as someone who sees so many of the difficulties that families encounter in raising children, I do think taking a little bit more of a, like a village approach can be helpful. But that requires you to lower your sense of defensiveness and not take things so personally. So if someone else sees your child doing something and maybe corrects them, you don't need to take it personal that you've done something inadequate. It could just be that other person was there in the moment. And when things happen in the moment, that is really the best time to make a statement, as long as someone's not being overly hurtful, or overly mean or overly judgmental. I do think that there's often situations where kids take feedback better from other parents as opposed to from their own parent.
Sure. Anyone who's ever tried to coach their own kid probably understands that. Better to have the other coach talk to your child, usually. So there's also problems with finances right now. What if someone says something which is kind of triggering? What if someone says, hey, why aren't you working? Why can't you find a job? Or don't you have a job yet?
Right. So that's always a difficult, difficult, especially like college grads who finished back in the spring, and you have no idea if they're working now or what they're doing for work. You think, well, there's tons of jobs out there. Why can't they just find a job? So again, it's really trying not to ask directed and pointed questions like, why don't you have a job? And more things like, so what are you doing with your time? Or how are you keeping yourself occupied? Or what are you doing to feel fulfilled these days? I mean, so it's asking a more general question. And then that opens the door for that young person to perhaps, or even older person, right? Because people, there are layoffs and people lose their job and then have to find another job. To say, well, I've been engaging in a job search. It's been really hard because I have a very specific skill set. And then again, to make supportive comments. I think oftentimes people with good intentions feel that they have to fix or solve someone else's problems when that's not the case. Unless you have a direct lead to a job that someone might be able to step into, to just be supportive. Say, wow, that must be difficult, right? We call it reflective listening. So you're reflecting back on the sentiment or the feeling or the concern. That must be difficult, or it seems like you've really been trying hard to find something and nothing's panned out, right? So you're reflecting back what you're hearing. You're not necessarily taking on that you need to fix someone else's problem.
Yeah, that is a big one. And I'm guilty of that too. Especially working where I am in this business, I might know, well, Dr. Laura Saunders would say, like, no one asked me for my advice. So I guess that's something we have to keep in mind too, as we're going to these, we're talking about how to handle when someone's rude and remembering those I statements, even having them ready to go. But the vice versa, people also have some social anxiety and they feel like drained or they don't know what to say. So vice versa, how can you handle that? Do you just try to go and make sure you're asking questions about others? Or what if you're one of those people who feels nervous at a party?
So I think there's a lot more people that feel nervous in those situations than we often realize. And especially because this is a time of year where there's a lot of different gatherings. There might be work parties. There might be, neighborhood parties. There might be other social events, extended family, where you are engaging with people or interacting with people that you don't see on a regular basis. So having ways to make connections, honestly, one of the best ways to make connections is to ask open-ended questions about someone else. Hey, what was the best thing that happened to you this week? What's new in your life? What's something that's new and interesting that's going on with you? What's something that you've done lately that you feel really good about, right? So having some of these sort of phrases or questions where you can open it up. And then, certainly the hope is that the person then says, well, tell me what's new going on with your life. And then if you say, oh, nothing, that kind of ends the conversation. So often in these situations, have something else to jump in with. And again, they don't have to be deeply personal, but it could be, I've had a change in my work situation. I'm working in a new building. It feels a little bit more isolating, right? So having something to share or something to make a connection about.
Yeah, and I love that it's more open-ended. If you don't know someone very well, I guess that's the easiest thing, is the open-ended, and ask them questions about themselves. Because it seems like when people ask, how are you? And you say, fine, like it seems that people don't want to hear the real answer. Or what if you're not fine?
Right. And actually, so that's a great point. So what I say is, if you're on the line at the grocery store and you're not doing self-checkout and the grocery clerk says, how are you doing today? The grocery clerk is not actually asking for how bad your day was, or maybe how good your day was, right? You're saying, wow, I had a good day. Thank you for asking. Or it wasn't such a great day, but I'm hoping to turn it around. At other events, it's reading the subtleties of a situation and how well you know someone. Sometimes it's like making a connection. If you're talking to someone and saying, tell me what's new in your life, and they say, oh goodness, I've lost someone dear to me, or I've had a big change in my job situation that really has kind of got me down, right? If they're sharing something, that then opens the door for you to say, goodness, I've lost someone in the last year also. It does make the holidays a little bit harder, right? I sometimes think of social situations as peeling away the layers of an onion, right? You start really with the outer layer. It's a little bit more superficial. The inner layers can sometimes make you cry. I don't know that we necessarily want to get that far, but, just reading a situation, sharing something. If you share something personal and the other person doesn't really kind of respond or reciprocate, then don't go any deeper and don't share any deeper, and then kind of reflect it back on them.
Yes, and we have done other episodes, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but what to do if you're kind of walking into a fire pit where you're going to see someone who you feel pretty toxic about, like psyching yourself up for that, setting boundaries ahead of time. So much of this is kind of self-preparation is what you recommend. So we kind of walk in with our boundaries, with our armor, if we can use that word. I want to get into a little bit about introvert versus extrovert, though, because I think a lot of people don't understand this and how we can get overstimulated or drained. I didn't know that I was technically an introvert until I was probably in my 30s, and a therapist said to me, you're an introvert. And I said, do you know what I do for a living? I'm not an introvert. And they said, it has nothing to do with being shy. It's whether you gain or lose energy in a social situation. And so, talk a little bit about that, about how you know if you're an introvert or extrovert and how that's going to affect you this time of year.
So this really came up a lot, certainly in the beginning of COVID, where people were realizing, goodness, so the basic definition that people use that you alluded to is an introvert is someone who rejuvenates or gains their emotional energy by spending time alone so that they can then tolerate more social situations. An extrovert is someone who feels energy or gets juiced up by social situations to be able to tolerate time alone. And then there's actually a good number of people who fall in that sort of what's being called like an ambivert, right? Some people who really like and enjoy situations, but can spend equal amounts of time on their own and have more of a balance in those. So we're really looking at sort of all three subgroups. And for those individuals that are introverts, the only thing that I do worry about is that too much isolation can really have an effect on your sense of well-being. And so while we have opportunities to socially connect with other people, to go to a neighborhood party, to engage in something that might be a little bit more social, that we take advantage of some of those opportunities. Now, you don't have to take advantage of every social opportunity, but to realize that there's things outside of ourselves. I'm a little biased because I love social connections. So I love to connect with people at events and hear what their backstory is, or ask them something, sometimes a silly question like, tell me what's the best thing that happened to you this week, right? And then see how they respond. But I'm kind of odd in that way.
Well,
but
you're a psychologist,
a lot of people
so
just,
everyone's going
just
to wonder
really
what to say
need
to you.
to get out there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the extroverted introvert thing, that's what I consider that. I do enjoy those things, but maybe we tend to, if you gave us a choice, I'd rather maybe have a smaller dinner party than a crowd of 100, though I could do the crowd of 100, but probably not more for an hour or two. And then I would need to go. So I guess a part of that is you would want us to kind of know how we handle these things, because you might wake up the next day just feeling awful or leaving feeling really drained and awful and not understand why. So the more you understand about this, the more you're able to manage this busy time of year.
Well, I like the way you kind of started off this conversation by saying, like, it took you to getting into your 30s to realize that actually you have a lot of kind of introverted characteristics, or there's a large part of how you see yourself that really means, like, rejuvenating when you're on your own, that it takes time to realize these things about ourselves. And it's great to realize it through therapy. Sometimes you realize these things through introspection, through meditation, through experiences. A lot of people learn through experiences. As you said, you go to an event or a party, you feel like you're having a good time, but you're like, when can I leave? When can I leave? You get home and then you feel really drained. The next day you realize that there was something about that social event that, while you enjoyed it while you were there, was very, very emotionally draining for you.
So people need to think about that. But back to the rude comments. If you're going, I guess it depends on a different setting. I want to leave people with their marching orders, so to speak. I like to give them, 3 things. But number 1, remember those I statements. If someone is rude, you want an I statement ready to go, like, well, actually, I'm feeling very healthy. I haven't, or flip it back on them, so that you can let them know you don't appreciate the rude comment about the weight, but also not take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's making an I statement. It's having that comment or that that question in your pocket around flipping the script, or how to make a connection with someone. And it's also, giving yourself permission to, stay a limited period of time, or set a boundary, or exit a situation if you're uncomfortable for some reason. So I think the key to a lot of these situations is planning in advance.
Yeah, have those statements ready to go. Have an exit strategy or a place to calm down if someone really says something rude to you that you think might trigger you.
Right. And, having when you go into these situations, if you know the host, or if you're bringing a friend with you, or you're bringing a spouse with you, that you communicate in advance. Look, I'm a little nervous. I don't really know a lot of people here, so I might not stay a long time, right? And then, or the host might say, you know what, I really think you'd like this person. Let me introduce you to this person. And then that's kind of a starting point. So I do think, like, not holding in all, like, the social anxiety or the struggle, and letting someone else know, letting the person you're going with, letting the host know, admitting to one of the first people you're talking to, I actually really have a hard time in social situations. I'm a little nervous to be here, right? To make that kind of an I statement and be vulnerable, I think can be powerful, because you're really releasing the power of that anxiety.
Yeah, I do love that. All right, we only have 3 minutes left, but I do want to ask you one more question, asking for a friend. But teens, people, babies, different. Little kids, you can kind of excuse the behavior. You might need to do a timeout. But teens can be very antisocial, right? They're just can be grumpy or whatever. How do we, as we're preparing our teens to maybe be around family and you want them to act a certain way, how do we manage our expectations and kind of encourage pro-social behavior so they're not just in the corner on their phones?
So that's a really critical part in that equation. It's managing our expectations. And so in those situations, what I suggest is lowering your expectations. So, so having your child, greet someone, maybe make, have a very short, how are you today? A very short conversation. Teens don't, for the most part, want to interact with adults. They just don't. So they tend to be a little bit more wanting to connect with people their own age. So I would just suggest lowering your expectations. I want people to have basic social skills. Hello, how are you? Goodbye, thank you for having me. But to really have limited expectations for what they're going to be able to do in some of these situations.
But the talk would be that, hey, I want you to look someone in the eye. I want you to shake their hand. I want to say thank you for having me. And I don't want you to just go sit in the corner on your phone, right? So maybe they're going to get some phone time, but do you set this up and say, make sure you at least go get something to eat, say hi to your cousins. Like, I don't want to just find you for the whole 2 hours doing this.
Yes, and really it depends on the situation. If this is a situation where these are people that they know and that they actually see on a, semi-regular basis, yes, setting some limits, especially around screen time. But if it's an event where they really don't know anyone, they're not going to necessarily interact with adults that they don't know. But yes, setting some limits, because screens are an easy escape and often a way to avoid managing any social interactions.
Okay. And so that's something we should just understand as parents. It's a little bit normal. The kids are not going to love, at least teens, are not going to love talking to all of our adult friends at the office party that they don't know.
Exactly.
Okay. Managing expectations. All right. So I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season and that you're armed with your I statements for rude comments. Thank you, Dr. Laura Saunders, as always, for helping us get some psychological strength here.
Take care, Kara.
Thank you. And thank you for watching CURES Cures. You can follow me on social media at Kara Sundlin or join the CURES Cures Facebook group for more information on the cutting edge of wellness. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.